Yo guys, how's it going? Back with the second deck for our timeline series, going back retrospectively and looking back at the speed duel decks that were popular throughout the entire course of its history. This time we've got a deck that I think a lot of people will resonate with. It was very popular, definitely more popular than Tribal. More people use it in tournaments. It won a bunch of tournaments. I think it won European Championships, a couple other ones, and some online ones as well. Compared to Tribal, it was the more powerful but less consistent deck, but it definitely competed with Tribal as well. So I wanted to go over it. There are a couple builds I could have picked from. I could have picked Nick's European Championship list. I actually picked Jordan Palmer's list from the NAWCQ back in June. Looking back retrospectively, I would probably build this deck a little differently, but I want to stay true to how the decks were built back then. And I think Jordan's list is really good. He leaned on more the consistent side instead of just throwing in a bunch of powerful cards. So I really like that part about his deck, and we'll go over it. So most Gravekeeper decks used the skill card It's My Lucky Day in conjunction with Dice Foon, which allowed you to destroy one card, or one speller trap, or two speller traps. Let you play a lot of mind games, and since it played big beaters and powerful monsters, clearing the back rows and letting you just go in and not get stopped was an insane synergy with the deck. So It's My Lucky Day was definitely the best skill with Gravekeeper. So we went to the main deck. All Gravekeeper lists played 3 Ambusher and 3 Recruiters. Ambusher was a total beast back then. 1700 attack is really huge. It beat over everything in Tribal Synergy. And then it was important to have your own Ambushers against your opponent's Ambushers in the mirror match, of course. It was just all your cards kind of revolve around Ambusher. All your defensive cards, your removal. So very important card. Also not to be understated is Recruiter. Searches out your Ambushers, of course, and also searches out Gravekeeper Oracle, which is the power card of the deck. Basically, if your opponent overcommitted monsters to the field and you dropped Oracle, you won the game. A lot of times, if your Tribal opponent had like 3 monsters on the board and you summoned an Oracle, you just won the game right there. So Tribal had to kind of play around this a bit, only commit like 1 or 2 monsters to the board, but then they could get blown up by Dice Foon. So you had a lot of mind games there. A lot of people played 2 Oracles, but I think that's kind of leaning too much towards the powerful side. It's a lot more consistent to just play 1. Once you're dropping the 1, if you time it correctly, it puts you in such a really good position, or you're winning the game that turn. Especially you have the guarantee with the Dice Foons to make sure it's going to go through and your push is going to go through. So I think 1 was enough. Sometimes the second one came up in the mirror match. Let's say if you dropped your Oracle first, they dropped theirs back, and then you protected it with a trap, then you could tribute your 0 attack Oracle for another one. But I feel like you could play it a certain way so that that situation didn't come up. And yeah, 1 Oracle, definitely enough, I think. You're probably playing it wrong if you felt like you needed to. I think by the end of the format, a lot of people dropped to 1. So yeah, 1 Oracle. And then something that Jordan did that I like a lot was he played Gravekeeper Spear Soldier as a 21st card and the 7th normal summon. So playing as a 21st card only increases your odds of opening a normal summon by like 1%, I think it was. But that's still 1% more than you would have anyway. Plus it's adding the utility of having this effect of piercing in your whole deck that you can search with Recruiter. You can bring it back with Rite of Spirit. And it's very important back then because Ambusher has 0 defense and Lucky Day costs 1,000 life points to use. So 1,500 life points, that's almost half the life points. Definitely not an effect that's just there. It's very important. It's a threat by itself, a game-winning threat by itself, actually. So I really like this card. Just being able to have a normal summon to go with your Kunais, your Windstorms, your Ready for Interceptings, to tribute for Oracle, to bring back with Right was really good. More than 1, kind of, I don't think is needed, but I really like the 1 Spear Soldier. So after that is Sphere Kribo. He only played 2, which is kind of understandable in this deck. There's a lot less space than Tribal had, but you still want the Sphere Kribo, so you're allowed to play around Dice Foon. You don't have to commit to the board and get blown out. So I do like the additions of Sphere Kribo in this deck. And that's it for the monsters. So then we go to the spell cards. Only plays 2 Dice Foon. Back then there was a lot of talk. Some people played 3 because they wanted to see it opening hand, and I think that just left too much up to chance. You really don't want to be using this card without your skill, and that skill is only once per turn. On the flip side of that, some people were playing 1 because they feared using the second Dice Spoon and drawing it and having to use it without the skill. But I do think 2 is the right number. You have to see it. You have to see it early enough to pressure your opponents. I mean, if you're going to see a late game, you're already probably losing. Tribal already has +3, or your Gravekeeper opponent already resolved their Dice Spoon because they had more copies in your deck. So I think 2 is the perfect number. This card's super powerful. I have PTSD just looking at it. It's insane. So yeah, Dice Spoon, kind of a very important card of this deck, helping you push your oracles through. And then 3 Kunai Chain, just like I said in Tribal, this trap card's amazing. Trap of the format. It was really nice in this deck because if you put on a recruiter and they tilted their recruiter, it still had 1500 defense. So kind of like if you put it on Swordswoman or something in Tribal, still really hard to run over, even tilted. And then it has some pretty high attack. So very important card in this deck and in all the decks in Speed Duels back then. And then this deck, he chose to play 2 Windstorms, which I understand. Like I said earlier, space is kind of an issue in here. And it's not really an issue of when Tribal, when you're playing a mirror match, like the 3 monster thing, you really wanted to have your field bigger than theirs. And if they had more monsters than you needed the Windstorm to kind of even it out. But in this deck, you can drop Oracle. You can pretty much neutralize their monsters. So you don't really care. You don't have to Windstorm a bunch of monsters because they'll be at 0 attack. It is really nice when you Oracle something to 0 attack, they change it to defense, and then you can Windstorm it back to attack and attack them for a bunch of damage. But you have Spear Soldier to punch through those anyways. So I don't think cutting the 3rd Windstorm is too big a deal. Plus you need to make room for the second Ready for Intercepting, which I think is really important in this deck. With Tribal, any tilt kind of did the job for you, but here the Blue Eyes matchup is so much harder. You kind of have to hope to have a Ready for Intercepting for the Lord of D. Also Relinquished is much harder for this deck. With Tribal, you could set your Heartbeat Lady 1s, your Swordswomans, and it'd make it really awkward for them because they would have to either suck up set monsters or run into defenses that they couldn't kill. In this deck, if they take your Recruiter, it could make your Oracles dead, it could make your Rite of Spirits dead. You do have Dice Spoon, so it kind of helps in that matchup a bit, but you really want more help against Relinquished when playing Gravekeeper. So I think this was really important. It was worth the risk. You had more blowouts against the rogue decks that it didn't work against. You could use Oracle against zombies, punch through a zombie, and that's 4,000 damage if they have the skill up. So it wasn't too much of an issue for this deck, so it was able to utilize the pros of Ready for Intercepting more than other decks. And then lastly, 2 Rite of Spirits. A lot of people play 3 of this card. Again, I think it's more important to focus on consistency and not just power and swarming the field. I think this card, even now in this deck with 21 cards, 7 normal summons, it can be dead sometimes. So I think 2 is the perfect number. Plus, you don't want to have so many unchainables when you're in a Dice Spoon meta. So 2 Rite of Spirits perfect for that. And this is the deck. Then we'll go over the side deck. So the side deck that he played was, I'll just lay it out all together. We have 2 Time Wizards because, as I mentioned before, the Blue Eyes matchup is really hard, and you kind of just have to hope that you can survive their turn. If you can't Ready for Intercepting the Lord D, hope to survive their push turn, and then just use Time Wizard with It's My Lucky Day to blow up their field, and they usually couldn't come back from that. It was kind of like a 1-push deck, and then that's all I had. So if you could clear the first push they made, you won the game. So 2 Time Wizard, pretty important for that. I think I do agree with this. And then he played Possessed Dark Soul. Like I was saying, the Relinquished matchup is a little harder. It's really nice to just have a blowout for that. And if you do somehow lose to zombies game 1 because you draw a bunch of Ready for Interceptings, it's a nice blowout for them too. So this was a nice card. This side deck isn't very pressed for space. So you can afford to use cards like Possessed Dark Soul, stuff like that. Very linear use cards. And then Warrior Elimination, much better in this deck than in Tribal, because in Tribal you kind of have to be careful. It's really awkward. You could hit your own warriors, but in this deck, you're playing spellcasters, it doesn't matter. You can draw it whenever. If you both have established boards, you just draw it. It's a blowout. You just destroy their field, and then you win the game. It made things awkward for the tribal player because they wanted to summon their Amazon first. So then turn 2, they could summon their Harpy and resolve tribal synergy, and you wouldn't be able to stop it with ready for intercepting. But then if they did that and you had warrior elimination, then they wouldn't be able to draw 2 anyways, even summoning the warrior first. So it kind of had, there were mind games involved with that to an extent. It's really good in this deck. Huge blowout against tribal, like I said, so they always had to play around it. If you went through like an entire game 2 and they didn't see it, you were kind of having trouble because in game 3 they knew they didn't have to play around it. So it was very important to have 1 at least. And then he played a 3rd ready for intercepting, just to kind of guarantee against relinquished and just more help against blue eyes. There's only so much you could do. The card pool was really limited, so you kind of just had to hope. So this was an important card, I think. And then Dust Tornado, just another good card against relinquished. A card you can take ready out for intercepting out for against zombies. You replace the 2 readies in the main deck for Dust Tornado and Possessed Dark Soul. So the side-ins and side-outs with this deck work really well. And just an all-around good card. So yeah, that's the deck that he played at the NAWCQ. I think he made the finals 6 times and won 4 of them. So yeah, that's the deck. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please subscribe if you liked the video and want to see more. We're going to be posting the next deck here soon, a couple days as well. Keep this thing rolling. Also check out our Patreon if that's something that sounds like it would interest you. But until next time, peace guys.